Right, I think I'll start. We've got a pretty good group of people arriving, and hopefully they'll continue to arrive. So, kia ora, everybody. Thank you and welcome to another one of our Good to Know webinars from Healthcare Plus. I'm Alan Sharp, and I'm your host for tonight. And I'm really happy to welcome back Liz for tonight's session. I think this might be the third time she's joined us over the last year. And tonight we're going to be chatting about money and the current money issues of the day that's out there, like, you know, the state of the economy, what the impact of high interest rates right now, how do we manage our money in this time period, what should we be doing to pay off debt, how do we manage our mortgage, Kiwi savers, retirement planning, all of those kind of things we'll hopefully try and cover tonight in our conversation. As always, we asked you for questions and the questions that you wanted answered, and you didn't disappoint. We've had a huge response from everybody. And to be fair, we've got more than enough questions to do probably 4 or 5 webinars. But I think we've managed to select them down to a few pretty representative questions that'll cover off most of the key issues that you wanted to hear about tonight. So my job will be to pose those questions to Liz, and hopefully we can get a good conversation going around the issues that are most pressing for you at the moment. However, if you think of anything as we go through and we're having our conversation, then feel free to pose that question. You can either use the chat function or the Q&A function on the app, and I'll keep an eye out on that. And when we've got some time, maybe towards the end, we will answer some of those questions. If we don't have time to answer those questions, don't worry. What we'll do is we're going to collate all the questions that have been asked and come up with some answers, and we'll provide you with a Q&A kind of answer blog post this webinar. We'll also be recording the event tonight, so again, if you want to go over it again, you can. We'll send that out to you. If you want to send that on to friends and family, then of course you can do that too. But anyway, that's enough of me. Kia ora, Liz, how are you, and welcome.
Oh, thanks, Alan. It's really good to be back again. I really enjoy doing these webinars for you. And we've got lots to talk about tonight. Look, there's one thing I do want to cover off before we start, and that is I am no longer a financial advisor in terms of the regulations and so on. And I would like to point out that we're going to cover a lot of information tonight which you should treat as being of a general nature. So if you need specific advice about your circumstances, you really do need to go and see a financial advisor for that personalised advice. And judging by the questions, I think there's a number of people who are in that category of really needing that personalised advice.
Yeah, that's a good comment, Liz, and thanks for that. And as Healthcare Plus, we have a nationwide network of advisors who can help in that sort of insurance and protection side. But absolutely, I think get expert advice. If you've got, there are some quite specific questions that we saw coming through, and I totally agree with you. I think these are the type of questions that if you have got those, then you should be looking at an advisor. But let's kick on. Let's start, and let's start at the top, I guess, with the economy. It seems to be the big thing right now. It's I guess it's going to be the big talking point in the upcoming election. And there's so many different stories around why the economy is the way it is. So let's try and jump into that and sort of get some kind of view on it. So one of the questions we're going to ask here is it true that printing money during COVID caused the inflation and the high interest rates we now see? Or is it true that unemployment must rise before inflation and interest rates come under control? Can you outline the sort of relationships between inflation, interest rates, and the employment rates, and just give us an idea of what's going on?
Sure. Actually, I did see some good news today that we are officially no longer in recession. Our GDP has gone up. So Let's just cover the basics. So we know that the economy goes in cycles. So we have boom cycles, and we have, if you like, bust cycles, so where we go into recession. So that's just the nature of the beast, and it's a bit like, you know, the four seasons, you know, spring, summer, autumn, winter. The economy goes through similar kinds of cycles. So the job of the Reserve Bank is to try and smooth out those cycles. And I liken it a bit to being like driving a car. So if you think of the Reserve Bank governor sitting behind the wheel of a car, and you're trying to keep that car at an even speed, but along the way you have hills and you have valleys, which can alter the amount of acceleration or brake you need to apply to the car to keep it at an even speed. And so the two main tools that the Reserve Bank will use in order to do that are restricting the amount of money in circulation and also interest rates. So those are the two main levers that they use to control the speed. So that's, you know, where the, you know, accelerator and brake comes in. Now the difficulty with managing an economy is it's slightly different than driving a car in the sense that there's a lag between putting your foot on the brake or the accelerator and the change in performance of the vehicle. So while they might use those levers at times to accelerate or slow down the economy, there can be, you know, like an 18-month lag before they see the impact of the changes that they've made. So there's a lot of guesswork involved in terms of maintaining that constant speed. And so sometimes they overshoot the mark. Well, more often than not, they do. So it's really just a matter of coincidence if they happen to get it right. So usually there's a bit of overshooting or undershooting of the mark. So what we saw during COVID, that was a bit like going uphill. You know, we knew there was going to be a lot of things that would make it hard for our economy to perform well. And so what they did was they put the foot on the accelerator, and they did that by increasing the amount of cash in circulation and by lowering interest rates. So that's the equivalent of accelerating. Now, the downside of that is that if you overshoot the mark, what you end up with is a huge increase in consumer spending. That puts pressure on prices, so you get inflation, you get shortages of skilled workers because everybody's racing to keep up with consumer demand. They can't produce enough goods and services. And that's what we saw happen, is that I think a lot of economies around the world, not just New Zealand, were rather panicked by what happened during COVID, feared the worst, and so pushed a lot of money out there to stimulate the economy. But in hindsight, and we didn't know this at the time, in hindsight, probably went a bit too far. And so now we're seeing the reverse happen, where they're putting the brakes on. So what they're doing is restricting the amount of cash in circulation and increasing the interest rates to slow it down, to bring it back to that constant speed. And we know we've still got a wee way to go, because our inflation is still way beyond the target rate of 0 to 2%. It's somewhere, you know, around the 6% mark. We're pretty much following the same pattern as most other developed countries in this regard. So it's not just us, it's everywhere. And, you know, although it's good news to see the headline that we're out of recession, in a way it's kind of bad news as well, because it means that if we've got still that growth in the economy, we've still got a shortage of workers, we're still going to have inflation. So that means they're going to have to keep putting the brakes on to slow it down a bit. And that means potentially interest rates could go up even higher. So that, in simple terms, is what I see as the linkages there. So of course, you know, when they put the brakes on, that lowers the amount of employment, potentially slows everything right down. Again, they can overshoot the mark by putting the brakes on it as well. So it's just it's a bit of a game, really, trying to tweak it to get it just right.
Right. So obviously we've got an election coming up So what do you think do you think the change of government, if there is a change of government, may affect or have an impact on interest rates? And what do you think is the sort of plan for interest rates over the next couple of years or 12 months?
Well, look, I don't think we have a lot of choice in this matter. I think, we need to still focus on the same goals. It's just that how we go about it might be slightly different under one government versus the other. So I think, the Reserve Bank still has a degree of autonomy in that respect. I mean, they are contracted to keep the inflation between 0 and 2%. I can't see that changing. So I think the Reserve Bank will still be operating in a very similar way as what it is doing now, regardless of which party is elected. But there might be, as I say, some different pathways to achieving the same goal. So, but I think everybody realises that we need to bring that rate of inflation down, and that most probably means interest rates creeping up a bit, and we'll eventually hopefully settle into a new normal kind of pattern, which will be slightly different than what we have now. So yes, I can't see there'll be a huge difference regardless of who is elected.
Okay, thanks for that. So, I mean, I guess with this cost of living so high, and as you say, the potential for the continuation of rising interest rates, with money generally harder to manage for most people at the moment, what are your best tips for sort of building wealth or getting out of the week-to-week struggle that many people may be currently facing at this point in time?
Look, it's really hard out there at the moment, and I know food banks are rushed off their feet trying to prop people up. A lot of people are looking at ways to bring in boarders or whatever to help cover their mortgage payments. Things that are very tight, and that's deliberately so on the part of the government because they want to stop spending, as I mentioned earlier. So the key thing is to have a really close look at your budget. Now, when things are tight, if you're struggling from payday to payday, there's a couple of items that really stand out in your budget. Well, there's about three really. There's your mortgage payments or your rent payments is one big item. The next big item is food, and the third, well, not really an item, but a category is unnecessary spending. Well, when I say unnecessary, I mean money that you're spending on things where you don't really have to spend that money. So those are the things to take a look at. So firstly, you've got to make sure your mortgage is structured properly. And I know a lot of people have chosen at this time to extend the period of their mortgage, extend the number of years that they're going to take to pay it back. So instead of having a 20-year mortgage, they might renegotiate to have a 25 or 30-year mortgage to keep the payments lower. So you need to look at that. If you're really, really struggling, have a talk to your bank about what some options might be. Some people might also be in a situation where they need to take a bit of a repayment holiday, and so banks will allow that in certain circumstances. So have a look at those outgoings. If you're renting, then I guess the only choice you have is to move to somewhere cheaper to rent, and that's not easy to do. There's a shortage of rental properties still, and the rents are still well above what they were 2 or 3 years ago. The next big one is food, and this is an area that does need a lot of close scrutiny. And there is a survey published every year by Otago University, and you can go online and Google search it. It's the Otago University Food Cost Survey, and it will give you some guidance there as to what a typical family should be spending on food per week. And quite honestly, I see huge variation in families with what they spend. So I'll just quote you some figures here. So for a family of 2 adults and 2 children, on average in New Zealand, your spending on food, if you're just working at a basic level, would be about $273 a week. And if you're at the other end of the spectrum, quite extravagant, you might be spending $462 a week for that same family. Now that's a difference of $189 a week, depending what you're spending, depending how frugal you are. So there's a bit of a lesson in that, I think, to say, have a really close look, because you might be able to save yourself a couple of $100s a week just by looking at your food budget. Because after rent or mortgage, that is the biggest outgoing that you have. And so, as I said, the third category is what I call the non-essential spending. So it's little bits of money here and there that you might be spending on lunches and coffees and movies and takeaways and all that kind of thing. So the way I like to operate is to have a separate account, separate bank account that covers those kind of items, and then you can keep a lid on it. It's what I call leaky bucket syndrome spending. It's little bits that drip out of your bank account here and there. And if you have many, many, many little bits, they can add up to a lot of money. So, I like to, in a normal budget, have three categories of spending. What I call your financial commitments or your known expenses. That's money that you have to spend, and you generally know how much you have to spend and when that money is to be spent. So rent, mortgage, insurance, all those kind of fixed costs, they need to, in my mind, a separate bank account so that that money is set aside before you spend the rest. Then you have your non-essential spending, the bits I was talking about before, the leaky bucket stuff. Have that money in a separate bank account, and usually it's best if you're in a relationship, each partner has their own kind of non-essential spending account. And then you have another account that covers your food and other household running costs. And if you divide it up that way, it's a lot easier to keep tabs on your spending, and you can really see where your money is going, because mostly when people are living from payday to payday, they have no idea where their money is going, and they find it very difficult to save. So, in my way of thinking, if you have a certain amount of income coming to you each week, you need to work out what is your priority for spending that income. You have no choice about your commitments, you have a lot of choice about your non-essential spending, and you have some choice over your household running costs. And so you can decide how much you're going to spend and how much you're going to save. And so it's about sitting down and having a look at where your money is going. Maybe go through the last 3 months or so of bank accounts and just see where that money's been going. And that should give you a good idea of the things that you need to look at changing.
Awesome. That's really good information. To be fair, I like that idea of putting the money in buckets like that. And I remember doing an exercise like that a number of years ago around budgeting. And to be honest, I could not understand how much money we were spending on food. It was ridiculous. And one of the things that came out from that exercise with me was that we actually started looking at our food on a weekly basis based on menus and what you were eating each night, and you put the menus together. That made it so much easier to buy food to a menu, because generally when you go in the supermarket, you go in for certain things, but you end up coming out with a whole lot of other stuff as well. So the idea around how much money you can potentially save on food, I think, is quite important, because that was certainly one of the lessons I had years ago when I went through a budgeting exercise with my family and stuff. So great. However, one of the issues that we do have, I guess, is that right now people have got debt, and that gets in the way of some of this kind of stuff as well. So what have you got any tips or ideas around how people can potentially look at their debt and pay off their debt while money is pretty tight at the moment as well? I think that's quite an important question too.
Absolutely. So I think the key thing is to make a list of all your short-term debts. So we're not talking about mortgage, but things like credit cards, personal lending, store cards, that kind of thing. Make a list of what you have that's short-term, high-interest debt. And then look at setting up an increased payment into some of those debts to pay them off. So it starts with looking at your overall household budget and seeing if you can create a gap between your income and your spending so that you've got some saving that you can apply to debt, and start with the debts that have the highest rate of interest and pay those off first. If things are really, really tough, you can look to get those debts refinanced into just one debt that you pay off over a period of time. So it's what they call debt consolidation. And again, you should talk to your bank or some other financial institution about how you might be able to do that to make it manageable. Because the thing about short-term debt is that it can accumulate really quickly and the payments are very high, and if you fall behind, you've got massive interest rates, because those interest rates don't tend to come down. They still stay at around the 20% mark no matter what. So if you get into trouble, by all means go and see a budget advice service in your local area and get some help with it, and talk to the people that you owe money to see if you can come to some arrangement around paying off that debt. It's just really important to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and once you've got rid of it, not to get back into debt again, especially for things that aren't essential. So try and avoid that at all costs. But it's just squeezing that budget, and you're trying to create that surplus that you can pay it off quicker.
Yeah, and I guess if you're looking at a consolidation of a debt or different debts, that you whilst you might pay it off, make sure that you close it, because the last thing you want to do is leave that sitting there and have the sort of you might spend it again. So if you've got those consolidation loans, make sure that you close everything off that you've consolidated.
That's right.
All right, cool. And so I guess the biggest debt that we have is mortgages out there, and I guess interest rates is having the biggest impact on our mortgages. So what have we got? What can we be doing to maybe try and pay off our mortgages a little bit faster?
Sure. Well, I have a little system called chunking your mortgage. And what I like to do is divide the mortgage up into different compartments where you have perhaps like a line of credit or an offset facility. Now, that's a little bit complicated to go into in this webinar when we're short of time, but you can certainly talk to your mortgage provider about having a line of credit or an offset facility as part of your mortgage structure. And that's set at a floating rate, and it allows you to plough your savings into there, and what happens is you're offsetting the interest of that mortgage. So rather than having money sitting in a savings account earning hardly anything, you can apply all your savings to your mortgage, but know that you can access that money if you need it. Then the other thing I would do with the remainder of the mortgage is have it in 2 or maybe possibly even 3 chunks that have different maturities, because what you want to do is spread your interest rate risk with a mortgage, because interest rates, as we know, go through cycles, and you don't want to have all your money in one mortgage that gets renewed at a certain point in time at whatever the interest rate is at that time. So if you've got your mortgage divided into 2 or possibly 3 other components, then and maybe you have, say, a 1-year mortgage, a 2-year mortgage, a 3-year mortgage. So it means those mortgages are maturing at different time periods, and there will be a different set of interest rates available to you at that time. So it's spreading your risk in terms of what interest rate you end up paying over the longer term. So the idea is that if you're using your line of credit or offset facility, plough all your savings into there. And then if you've got a 1-year fixed mortgage, when that comes off fixed, you can use that line of credit or offset facility to pay off part of that principal, to pay off a chunk, and then refix it for another period. So it's just a way of being able to set aside money for your mortgage, as much as possible, but knowing that you can access it if you need to, and then at the end of that fixed period, you can apply it to the mortgage to reduce the principal. It's a really good way to get rid of your mortgage quicker, and as I say, to spread your interest rate risk over the life of the mortgage.
Thanks. That's cool. Interest rates, the high interest rates. How do we manage these high bank interest rates for our home mortgage? I mean, is that what you were talking about, potentially splitting it up over a couple of different chunks to have different interest rates coming off at different times?
That's right. So that's the best way to manage it, is to divide it into different lots so that you're renewing it at different rates. So you might have, because each different time period will have a different interest rate that applies to it. And it generally reflects what the banks expect interest rates to do over that time period. So it shouldn't be a matter of just putting it all into one mortgage and shopping around for the cheapest rate that's available now. You don't go for the lowest rate now, because that's going to put you in a vulnerable position going forward. You want to spread your risk a bit. So even though you might be paying more on your 2 and 3 year mortgages, that will still be of benefit to you down the track, because the interest rate environment will be different at that time, and you could end up finding that you're paying less than the going market rate at that point in time. So don't be tempted to just put it all on whatever is the cheapest interest rate at the moment. That is not a particularly good strategy. And again, talk to your bank or your mortgage broker about how to structure that. If you're already in a fixed mortgage, of course, you can't break that without the possibility of incurring a penalty. So you're in a position where you have to wait until it comes off that fixed period and then restructure it from there.
So you talked about a mortgage broker. Is it useful to have a chat with a mortgage broker before getting a mortgage? And is there a cost involved in having a conversation with a mortgage broker?
Look, absolutely, it's a good idea to talk to a mortgage broker. Find a really good one. I don't know how you do that, but I'm sure there's lots of good ones out there. And generally, they don't charge for that, because they're remunerated by the provider of the mortgage. So, have a shop around, and you can talk to a couple of different mortgage brokers and get some advice. There are some economists who provide commentary on mortgage interest rates. Tony Alexander is one of them. You could follow his commentary and see what he's advising is the best strategy for fixing mortgages. He's a well-known commentator in that regard. It does require careful thought, because if you do it right, you can save yourself thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars, over the life of your mortgage by setting it up properly.
Okay, and just on that, is there any benefit in having your mortgage paid out in weekly, fortnightly, or monthly, or what? Is there a sort of sweet spot for when you pay your mortgage on a regular basis?
Yes, look, if you've got the option of paying it fortnightly rather than monthly, then by all means do that. It will save you interest over the life of the mortgage, for sure.
Okay, cool, good to know. Here's an interesting one, which I guess is the idea around, do you have savings or do you pay off your mortgage? There's a specific, we have a 12 years left on our mortgage. Do we pay more into our mortgage to pay it off quicker, or do we put more money into our KiwiSaver to get government subsidies and to grow our savings? And there's another similar question here which talks about, is it better to save up for an emergency fund, or is it better to pay off your mortgage quicker? So I guess it's this idea, are you putting money into savings or your mortgage? What's the best way to do things and at what time?
Okay, well, let's start from the top. So you need to be putting enough into your KiwiSaver to make sure you get all those freebies. So to get your maximum employer contribution and to get your maximum tax credit from the government. So once you've got it set at that amount, then your next priority is to pay off short-term debt with your savings. And then if you've got no short-term debt, your next priority is to pay off your mortgage faster. So that's basically the rule of thumb. Get rid of debt before you invest. So just put the minimum into KiwiSaver that you need to get those contributions going in there. And with your fund. Sorry, I forgot to answer that one. So that's where you need that line of credit or offset facility. That becomes your emergency fund. So you apply all your emergency savings into that facility, and it will offset the interest that you pay on your mortgage. But you know that you can tap into that money at any time if you wish to.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I personally speaking as well, I know I went through a period where I was trying to put money in savings accounts and pay off short-term debt, and then I don't know where I saw it, but it was a similar kind of guidance around make sure you tackle your short-term debt first, and I did, and now I can put money in savings and I don't have the short-term debt, and it was such a transformation
Yes.
from a financial perspective for me. So yeah, I think that's good. That's good insight. Well, I guess moving on from mortgages, then let's talk about investments. So, you know, we've got our mortgage on track, and so the first question we've got here is: I've read that retirement funds should be diversified as a strategy to avoid all the eggs in one basket. Would KiwiSaver and term deposits be a low-risk strategy with steady returns once I've retired?
Okay, right. Yes, don't put all your eggs in one basket. KiwiSaver is a diversified fund. So putting all your money into one KiwiSaver fund doesn't mean it's not diversified. Let's get that clear from the start. It is fully diversified. And really, the balance between having it in KiwiSaver and in the bank depends on when you plan to spend the money. So KiwiSaver is for money that you don't need for at least 5 years and you know, maybe even longer. Of course, you can't take it out of KiwiSaver anyway unless you're about to buy a first home or you've reached the age of eligibility, you know, for most people at 65, and then you can take it out if you wish to. So really, KiwiSaver is a medium to long-term savings vehicle. Everybody, though, needs money in the bank to cover short-term needs. So my little rule of thumb is whatever you plan to spend in the next, say, 2 to 5 years, you should have that in some bank deposits somewhere, most likely. So just work out, you know, what you want to apply your savings to, whether you're saving for short-term goals or medium-term goals or long-term goals. Because, you know, we've got to have fun still through life, don't we? We can't just be saving up for retirement, we don't have holidays or we don't buy a new car. So money for those purposes should by all means go into the bank if you're going to need it in the short term, and then your retirement savings needs to go into a diversified portfolio. So KiwiSaver is a good example of a diversified portfolio. If you have a substantial amount, you may wish to go and see a financial advisor and have your own customised portfolio put together. A lot of the financial advisors won't set up a portfolio for you unless you have a minimum amount to invest, and that can vary between 100,000 and 500,000. So if you're what they call a smaller investor, then KiwiSaver can be, you know, a good option to give you access to that diversified portfolio on a sort of a pooled system.
So, is there, I guess, other schemes that potentially are similar to KiwiSaver or better than KiwiSaver, or is KiwiSaver your best long-term savings
Look,
scheme?
there's lots of different diversified funds available, and so you can yourself buy your own diversified fund that is not locked in the same way that KiwiSaver is. So if you are not yet eligible to take money out of your KiwiSaver, you might wish to build up money in a product that looks a little bit like KiwiSaver but which isn't locked in. Just in the event that if you suddenly need that money, if you have a health event or lose your job or your circumstances change in some way, you might want to access that money before you turn 65. So there are other diversified funds that you can invest in, or as I said, you can go and see a financial advisor and have your own customised portfolio put together. There are various platforms out there now that offer funds to people to set up their own portfolio. So Sharesies is one of them. Invest Now is another one. You've got Hatch. So there's various places where you can set up your own portfolio if you wish to, but you should at least be putting into KiwiSaver, as I said earlier, enough to get those freebies going and those contributions. And beyond that, if you're not yet 65, look at perhaps an unlocked product to be accumulating wealth in. Or some people want to invest in property as well as another strategy.
So it's interesting you mentioned Sharesies and Hatch and Invest Now, because we've just had a quick question come through. What is Sharesies all about, and is it worth accessing if you have spare money? So maybe you just want to explain a little bit about what some of these platforms might offer you as an investor.
Sure. So Sharesies offers people the ability to put very small amounts of money into an investment. So they pool it, so you can invest as little as a few cents into your Sharesies account. So you can put regular amounts in, or you can put large sums in there as well. They have diversified funds available in Sharesies as well as individual shares. I guess the key thing is if you're doing DIY portfolios, you really need to understand the basics of investing, the basic investment principles. And the key one there is diversification. So, unless you're prepared to do a lot of research around individual stocks and shares and bonds and all that kind of thing, you're probably better to invest via a fund than investing directly. Some people do take a very strong interest in those things, and that's fine, and they can put together their own portfolios and make sure their investment is spread amongst lots of different things. So there is a real danger, though, that people who don't understand those principles end up putting their money into things that are too risky on the one hand, or maybe they're too conservative on the other hand. So if you're going to do a DIY approach, I would recommend, reading up on those basic investment principles, maybe even have a chat to a financial advisor about what sort of investment profile should I have. Am I a conservative investor, a balanced investor, a growth investor, and then putting together a portfolio that meets that kind of investment profile.
Okay, cool. Well, you mentioned property, and I guess that's the big thing that Kiwis have always invested in. So the key question here is it a good time to be investing in property?
Look, if you talk to property investors, they will say any time is a good time to invest in property. You just have to find, the right property for the economic circumstances at the time, and you have to be prepared to be in there for the long term. So, I've invested in property myself very successfully, and I encourage other people to look at that as an investment strategy. But you do need to do your homework. So right now there are some early indications that property prices are rising again. But just like any other investment class, it's volatile. The prices go up and down. They're volatile, and so you have to be in it for the long term in order to be assured of getting a reasonable return. The key thing to watch with property is the cash flow. And I know we had a question from somebody about, they're topping up their investment property from their income, and how do they get around that? Well, I guess the nirvana for any property investor is to find an investment property that has both capital gain and a positive cash flow. Now, those sort of properties are very scarce, but when you buy a property, you do need to consider the cash flow. So that is, what's the amount of income you're getting from that property, and what are the outgoings for that property by way of rates, insurance, maintenance costs, any property management costs, that sort of thing. So if it's a negative cash flow, you will have to top that up out of your income. Now, that's not a good scenario. It needs to be avoided if you possibly can. At least try and find something that's neutral. And buy something where you've got a good prospect of getting capital gain. Certainly, your worst possible scenario is to have a negative cash flow and no prospect of capital gain. That would be just a nightmare. So property is by its nature what we call a leveraged investment. So you're generally borrowing money in order to invest. And that can have two outcomes. It can multiply your gains, and it can also multiply your losses if you don't know what you're doing. So you have to understand how the finances work on property investment. Do a lot of reading, talk to a lot of people about what kind of property to buy. That's a very key decision. Look at your cash flow, because you don't want to be in a situation where you can't maintain those outgoings and you're forced to sell just at the wrong time when the market has dived. That's a really good recipe for losing a lot of money. So as I say, any time is a good time to buy. You've just got to be careful at certain times about which property you buy and look at the cash flow.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess investments always is leading to retirement, and so we can touch on a couple of retirement questions just to finish off.
Yes.
And I guess an interesting one here, it fits me as well, is how much should I have saved by 50 if I'm wanting to retire?
Look, the answer to that is you're the only person that knows the answer to that because it depends what kind of life you want in retirement. So you need to work out whether you want to be traveling the world every year or sitting at home just spending time with your grandchildren. It depends where you live. What I can tell you is that for every $10,000 over and above your super, you will need about $180,000 of retirement capital to produce that $10,000 a year extra income. So you need to think about how much extra income you want over and above super, and then work it out from there, or go to a retirement calculator, which you can find on the Sorted website, or you can find one on my website, enrichretirement.com. But you have to set your retirement goals first in order to answer that question. I think we might have lost Alan somewhere along the way. So I will just continue on talking about that. So I think somebody also asked how they can set up, how much that money they need to.
Sorry, Liz, I had a wee bit of a technical problem there. I'm back. Sorry, I lost you for a second.
Yes, I was just
not sure what happened. Apologies, everybody.
I have finished answering that question. I was just going to go.
All right, okay. Okay, I've got a few others. So I mean, one of the things is, what is the sort of best? A question here is, what's the best retirement strategies for a single person facing retirement after a separation without owning a dwelling in New Zealand's housing market? Yeah, assuming you've accumulated 50k in portfolio of investments. So, I mean, I guess there's a lot of people out there who have gone through divorces and things like that, and now are struggling with the fact that they don't have properties. So what is a sort of strategy for people like that?
Oh, look, this is an awful situation to be in, and you're right, there are a lot of people in this situation. So really, if you've got some money, look, I just really believe that everybody should own a house if they can. You can use a reverse mortgage to top up if you haven't got quite enough to buy a house. So that's one strategy, or you can look at affordable housing options. So think about what your housing options are to give you certainty about your accommodation, because you don't want to be 85 and all of a sudden your landlord says, hey, I'm selling the property, you've got 3 months to get out of the property or whatever, or I'm going to redecorate and you can't stay here. So you need to have certainty around your accommodation. So, look at what the options are. Try and avoid being in a renting situation. So I think there was a lady who said she had 500,000 available. I would be tempted to use that as a deposit on a house and use a reverse mortgage or some borrowing from family, whatever, and find a cheap place to live somewhere. It might mean you have to move town, and find a way to live really frugally, because the other option is to be paying rent. And even if you had a sum of 500,000, that would very quickly disappear. And then you would be in a situation where you're having to live in social housing provided by your local council or something like that. So It's a tough situation, I know, and then we have such a shortage of affordable housing, especially for retirees. But I think, do your best not to be renting. Look at all the other options. Reverse mortgage. Can family help? Can someone put a tiny home on the back of their house for you? Look at every other option aside from renting if you can.
So what is the idea around reverse mortgages? Are there what are the pros and cons, and what exactly is a reverse mortgage?
Okay, so a reverse mortgage is a means by which you can tap into the equity, the money you've got tied up in your own home, and without having to make any repayments during your lifetime. So what will happen is the interest will accumulate over your lifetime, and at the end of your life, when the house is sold, the loan is repaid, including the accumulated interest. Now, that sounds like it might be a bit of a nightmare, but it's not. Honestly, for some people, it's a godsend. It's their only resort. It should be used as a last resort, and you should ideally leave taking out a reverse mortgage for as long as you can. So use up your savings and leave it as long as possible, and only use it for things that are really essential, such as doing repairs to your house or paying for urgent surgery, or replacing a car when you absolutely need a car. So there is nothing to be afraid of with reverse mortgages. They are set up so that there should still be money left for the beneficiaries of your estate when you pass away. And I think it's just that balancing act between you taking care of yourself and you taking care of the beneficiaries, your family and so on. And honestly, most children would much rather see their parents living a lovely, comfortable retirement than going without, so that they can leave more money behind for them. So really, it's just getting that right balance there and making sure you take care of your own needs first. There's no point saving. Yeah.
Good to know. I think lastly, we're pretty much coming to the end of the session, and there's been some great content and some great information from you, Liz. So thank you. The last question I've got here is, I guess this was everybody's big question in retirement, is how do I work out how much I need to take out of my KiwiSaver or my other savings to have a regularly fortnightly payment top up to my government super? So what do I live on?
Okay, well, there's a couple of answers here. One is the numbers I quoted you before, that for every 10,000 of income you want over and above your super, you need 180,000. So you can use that as a basis. So if you've got 180,000 in the bank, you can take out probably, or invested, I should say, in KiwiSaver, you can probably take out 10,000 a year, and after 20 years, you'd have nothing left. So that's one answer. That's just very much a rule of thumb. There is a company called Lifetime Retirement Income that has a calculator on their website that will give you the answer to that question. So their website is lifetimeincome.co.nz, and they specialise in this field. They will set you up with a portfolio and guide you on the way through as to how much you can safely take out of your portfolio each year without running out of money by the age that you nominate. So that's another way around it. There's lots of fancy mathematical formulas you can apply as well. If you start researching this, there's lots of different methods. There's the 4% withdrawal rate method, and all sorts of different strategies for it. But there isn't really a one definite certain answer to that.
No, and we've had Ralph and Chelsea on one of our previous webinars talking about that kind of subject, and what you need to live through that retirement period. So if people want to check that out, they can. There's a good hour session with the guys from Lifetime Income Retirement. Anyway, I think we'll wrap it up for today, Liz. I think it's been a fabulous session. I think there's a lot of good information that's come out of there. I mean, even I have managed to pick up some good little tips and tricks. I just want to finish off firstly by thanking everybody for turning up today and listening to us. Thanking you, Liz, in particular, for your sage expertise. And I would just like to finish off and ask everybody, if you've got a second, please can you just answer our little poll. We'd just like to know how you thought of the webinar. So it's right there right now on your screen. So if you can do that for us, that would be great. But once again, thanks, Liz. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoy listening to you talking about money, and thank you very much again. And thank everybody for turning up tonight. Good night. Cheers, all.
Thanks, everyone.